Throttle.
How do you brake in the corners if you have to brake?
Very lightly. Well, you ease on the brake or ease off a brake as you enter a corner and you start to lean over. If you have to brake while you're in a corner, you just want to roll the throttle out slightly and just ease the brake on. But if you get on them hard, it'll just throw you right on your head.
How do you brake in corners? That's difficult. It's a long process. I like to do all my braking straight up and down. I don't believe in trailing the brakes when you've already turned into a corner. I think that should already be done. And braking in corners, not that I don't use the engine to slow the motorcycle down with. However, you do want to be in the right gear so that when you let go of the brakes, you have proper RPM range so that you can accelerate.
Once I'm already in them, I'm off the front brake. I'm not on any brakes when I get into the corner.
In the corner, sometimes I try to use most of my braking in a straight line, but there are those points or places where you have to trail the brakes. And what I try to do is I'll just use one finger on the front brake, and as I need a little bit more to scrub the speed off, I'll just sort of tap it a few times, and that kind of pulls the front end down.
I brake all the way until I actually steer the bike into the corner, and I let the brakes off right as I steer into them. On some corners you can brake and steer into the corner, but most of it's braking all the way done and then you steer.
What if you have to put the brakes on in a corner, like someone's falling in front of you? What do you do? Do you stand the bike up? What do you do?
No, you just brake, and you brake real carefully.
Like not much?
Yeah, you don't grab a handful when you keeled over.
Well, actually, you don't want to get on your brakes while you're leaned over. Some guys are pretty good. They can use the brake while they're in a corner. I suppose that's when you can use your rear brake a little bit. If you're really good at it, you can just tap it a little to slow you down.
I would say no. I don't use, there's only a couple times, 3 times I think the rear brake can be used. And one is when you're leaned over at a 30% or greater lean angle in the middle of a turn. If you are very cautious with the rear brake, you can apply a little bit rear brake. If you try using the front when you're leaned over, it has a tendency to oversteer and wash the front end out. So I try to use a little bit of a rear brake when I'm in the middle of the turn too fast.
But if you really do have to get on the brakes really hard, you'll have to stand it up and get on the brakes real hard. And then if you have to maneuver again, get off the brakes.
In an emergency situation, I would, if in the middle of the corner I had to get on the brakes, I would stand the bike straight up, apply as much brakes as necessary. Of course, if it looked like I was going to run off the corner, I would give it a last-ditch effort to lean the bike as far as I could, whether it meant dragging a knee or whatever. I would rather go down a low side than go off the side of a mountain and try to take my chances hitting a guardrail or a tree or a rock. So it's not as bad as it might sound, but sometimes you have to think quick enough and not get the brain lock to where you get a fixation on an object and drive into it. It's always better just to give it one more shot, try to lay the bike in, and if you have to, just keep leaning over, and you'll probably walk away from it.
Stand the bike up. Usually, if you're leaned over and you jam on the brakes, I'm pretty sure you're going to go down. So you want to be straight up and down when you're on the brakes. Just like going into a corner, whenever you're on your brakes, you want to be straight up and down, especially in the rain.
Now, how do you avoid riders, bikes, or other things on the track that you don't want to hit?
Well, I think the main thing is that you don't want to have a target fixation on anything that falls off in front of you. You want to keep looking at where you want to go. If you're riding with somebody, you always have to have the idea that maybe they could possibly fall down in front of you and decide if you want to go around the outside of them, maybe getting taken out too, or you want to stay underneath them, and so that when they drift to the outside of the turn, you're not there along with them.
Usually if you're racing and someone crashes in front of you, whichever way you're turning, the bike is usually going to go the opposite way. So if you're in a right-hand turn, usually if someone goes down, they're going to go out to the left. So you want to just hold your line as much as possible.
To get through, Alan Scott takes the lead. Kenny Roberts Jr. goes by on their brake into no! Roberts Jr. is down. He locked up the front wheel too hard on the brakes.
You try to ride far enough ahead of yourself, and you do a lot of counter steering because that's the only way you can get the bike to turn fast.
So there's something in the street you got to avoid. You
counter steer and don't hit the back brake.
What you try to do is you look the other way, because again, if you get a fixation on a guy crashing, like today, for instance, Robbie Peterson on a Honda crashed right in front of me. I had not very much room to maneuver around him, but what I did, I just picked a reference point. I looked away from the accident, looked away, and I was free and clear. As long as you can pick a point that's safe, look away. Just never look at an accident or something happening, because you go like a magnet. You go where you look.
Well, I usually pick up those things way before I get to them, and you know, I make the direction changes that are necessary way before I get up to the that situation.
So you're looking ahead and anticipate what's happening.
Exactly.
And how would you could apply that to street riding for sure, right?
Well, looking ahead at it in anything you do in life is probably a good idea.
What do you do if you can't avoid things and you must go over them? Say you're on the freeway, a ladder or a 2x4.
Well, I've hit a ladder on a freeway, and you just try to hit it as straight as you can.
And do what? Do you do anything to the throttle, or?
No, not really. I just rode over it at the normal speed and just hope for the best. If you try to avoid it, most likely you're going to hit it at the wrong angle, and you're just going to be way out of shape.
In that situation, I think I'd give it more gas to try to get the front wheel light and get over it.
Physical skill to get these bikes around the racetrack. Rich Oliver is now coming through that section where Adamo crashed. You can see the hay bales. Oh my! Rich Oliver got so close.
What changes in the rain about your riding? Braking, steering, what do you have to do in the rain?
In rain, you have to be a lot smoother with your braking. You probably even would use a little bit more rear brake than you would in the dry. But it's more of a technique of just learning the controls, learning the throttle response, also with the braking in the rain. It's a lot of fun riding in the rain. I enjoy it.
In the rain, everything has to be done straight up and down, brakes especially, a lot of acceleration, and just like I told you about throttle control. Throttle control has to be very smooth in the rain. You can't be radical with it because it'll want to spin you and spit you off sideways every time. I think actually riding in the rain prepares you a lot for getting that nerve hooked up that runs from your wrist to the ass of the tires. That nerve has to be hooked up in the rain, and if you can learn how to do it in the rain, then when you get in the dry, you're a much better rider.
Now, I think back to a terrifying moment you had at Seattle when the bike went sideways in the rain. What do you do when the bike does get out of shape in the rain? I mean, what do you do with your throttle?
Well, the number one thing is not to snap it shut, because if it's sliding and you snap it shut, it has a tendency to want to high side you, grab traction and high side you off. It's such a minute process. It's difficult to think that somebody could do this, but actually I try to roll the throttle back a little bit so that it can catch up with itself and not come too far around.
You never want to hit the brakes in the rain while you turn over. That thing will just slide right out from under you. So you want to do all your braking straight up and down. Usually you can brake just as hard in the rain as you can in the dry, but long just straight up and down.
In the rain, I'll tend to use a little bit more back brake and braking on the street, and just real cautious of where you ride on the street, not right in the middle where the car's oil drains. You ride more toward the dotted line where the tires run, so you don't have as much oil, and just real cautious on the brakes.
Riding in the rain is a whole different ballpark. You have to really be careful. You can't lay the bike over as far. You're going at a lot slower pace.
Here's a shot of Scott Russell at Seattle International Raceway, practicing extremely good technique in the rain.
Caught all the time by Pascal Picot on the fast Yamaha. Picot getting the Yamaha very, very sideways.
So the key word in the rain is be smooth. Smooth with the throttle, smooth with the brakes, smooth in everything you do on the motorcycle, and be aware you can't lean it over quite as much as you can in the dry. Apply these techniques to your street riding and be aware that your visibility is cut, and so is that of other motorists. So beware in the rain.